Hello, it's Skayman from Bushel Plus and MAD Concaves. I'm going to do a short video here today on our various case concaves. We've come a long ways with these concaves from where we started. We used to build a wire one, and we tightened up the wire spacing to try and clean up the hopper. But what we found where we were causing rotor loss because we couldn't get enough grain out of the concaves. It did an excellent job in the hopper, but there was some loss. So we changed our way of thinking on building concaves. I don't think anybody misses putting those wires in there. On a case concave, there was 600 holes in there you had to fill with wires. It was pretty rude. So we switched to a grate style, which is this style. And the reason this has been working for us, we make this gap in here specific to what we want for getting grain out on various crops. We have 225, 300, 375, 435, and some other ones. I'll explain these numbers that I'm talking about, the 300, the 375, the 225. That's the gap between the bars. So if you had a factory one, it would be a 1/4 inch, which would be 0.25. So we have 0.225, which is just slightly tighter than that, and we have a 300. When we first started doing this, we weren't sure what size to use, and we had a 200, a 225, a 275, and it took a lot of trial and error to find out what really worked for our crops here. And what we've narrowed it down to is we have a 225 here, and that does your hard spring wheat, your hard threshing wheat, your flax. It does stuff like that. No cover plate required. This bar in here is like having two wires together, and it just holds it a little bit longer so that you can thrash it out better. And you'll find you get no balls in the hopper when you're doing flax. It does a very good job. Very hard to thrash wheat. It does an excellent job. You don't get white caps. But I highly recommend using the 300 if you're not thrashing real hard to thrash wheat, because we want to get at least 90% out on the first two concaves out of the rotor. So the bigger the concave you can use, the bigger the gap, the more grain you get out, and you can get more at the front. I saw some, when I was in Australia, we went up to the 300, and you went from losing like 2 bushel in wheat to down to 6 kernels consistently by just putting in a bigger concave in the front to let more grain out. So once again, the 225 is meant for very hard to thrash. The 300 is for easier to thrash. And in the second hole, if you require a second one in the second position, if your other concaves aren't in too good a shape, you can put a 375 in there, and you can pretty much leave that in there for all crops. It's a nice versatile concave, and you're not having to switch anything around because it'll do pretty much all your crops, right from wheat to peas and various crops. Our 435 was designed for chickpeas. They found that this measurement seems to be the best measurement in the gap in there for chickpeas. It works very well. The guys south of Regina worked with us quite a bit, and we inched our way up to this measurement, 435. It's just under 1/2 inch, and it's been working very well. And if you have a 435 on your farm for the chickpeas, throwing that in the second position when you're doing canola, barley, and oats works very good, because the bigger the concave, the better. You want to let out as much as you can. And if you got her, use it. It's an excellent concave. This one here is our finger grate. So when we get done the wheat and we're switching to our other crops, such as canola, barley, oats, even corn, we're finding that this works for quite a wide variety of crops. So we'll pull the 225 out that we talked about earlier, and we throw this in the front in the first position, one on each side in the front position, and that'll look after your shatter-resistant canola, your barley, your oats, and it's got lots of hole, gets a lot of grain out. It stops over thrashing of the pods and stalks, and it's a lot easier to separate pods that are just split open instead of all ground up, and it's more or less real fine chaff. That's very hard to separate from canola. So the more you can dump out the front without it getting pulverized is the less chance it's going to go out on the rotor. or dumping it too far back on the road and it falls on top of all the chaff that's on the sieve and you've got to separate that out. The easier you make it for the combine to do its job, the better. So having the appropriate concave in there is a great benefit. We've seen a lot of case combines, they'll be tossing between 1 and 3, 4 bushel of canola, and by just pulling out your narrow wire out of the front and throwing this in, it'll quite often drop it to under half a bushel. So it's very worthwhile, can save you a lot of money. This is my old favorite, the slotted concave. We've been building this for a long time, and there was a time when we sold more of these concaves than any other concave that we built. In fact, more in total than all the rest of the concaves. We were using it in canola, it was working very well, but when the shatter-resistant canola came along, it has no bars on it. It just simply dumps everything out, and it just wouldn't thrash out the shatter-resistant canola. So now it's mostly used for seed. Seed growers use it for beans, peas, and delicate crops like that where they're concerned about germination. It's very good for that. It just doesn't do any damage. And also, one other benefit, you can't hurt it. You can run stones through this. There's no bars to hit on. You'll see them gouged up, but you can't really damage them so that you can't use them. It's an amazing old concave. It's one of my favorites. And last but not least, we got the alfalfa one down here, and I worked with a lot of alfalfa growers in the past, and we finally got the gap down to what they thought was the best. It's been thrashing out the alfalfa very well. I usually put 4 of them in the combine in the first 2 positions on each side, and it's been working very well. We got them, you know, in Nevada, Australia, up into northern Saskatchewan, and guys are really liking them. It's doing a good job. It seems to break those whorls up, gets the seeds out, and very seldom it plugs unless you're into very wet stuff. And I had one guy tell me that if it's that wet and plugging, you should be taking the combine out of the field and getting the sprayer back out and give her one more shot of Reglone. So once again, we got the alfalfa, the slot, the finger grate for your shatter-resistant canola, oats, barley, your 435 for chickpeas. The chickpea guys told us exactly what they wanted, and that's what we give them. 375 for the second hole, which can stay there for most crops, 300 for easy thrashing, and the 225 for hard to thrash, wheat and flax. So with that pretty much gives you the full story on all our concaves here. And if you've got any more questions, give us a call at Bushel Plus MAD Concaves. They're always around the phone, and I'll be glad to talk to you. Thank you very much.